What is good, basketball fans? Welcome to Dropping Dimes. It's coming. It's back, baby. It's back. Not only is Dropping Dimes back, but the NBA is back. And I am rolling solo on this first edition. My guest had to reschedule, had something else come up, a little bit of an emergency. I don't think it's anything too serious, thankfully. Fingers crossed on his end. But we're working on a date to get him back. I won't tell you who it is, but it's a fan favorite from before, and we've got a bunch of fan favorites coming up in the very near future. My goal with Dropping Dimes coming back is I intend on doing it twice a week for the duration of the NBA season until it closes out. And then through the postseason, this is going to be an abbreviated postseason. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'll still be doing, a show a week because right after the season ends, we've got the draft to contend with, and we've got free agency, and then there's the quick turnaround. So I might take a little siesta after all that is done for a couple weeks or something. Just depends on how it all plays out. But what's important to this is I'm going to be watching a ton of basketball over the next few months. I'm excited that we're back. I watched start to finish both of last night's games. As soon as I end this right now, I'm going to turn around and I'm watching games all the rest of the day. I cleared my schedule as soon as the NBA put out the opening round of games on the first 2 days. I told every person I knew, anybody that I had commitments with, whatnot, I am indisposed for these next 2 days. So much so that my wife got home early from work last night and she had to, basically listen to basketball in the background, much to her chagrin. But there was no way I was not watching the opening of the NBA last night to see. It was the bubble test. Did this all work? Are they going to put out a compelling product? How's it all going to look? And so I'll go through that aspect of it, and then I'll get into the two games, and then I'll close out. I don't know that this is going to be some extra long show. This is just basically a reintroduction of the show, a rollout, and then going to be doing, like I said before, 2 a week. Fridays, it looks like, are for sure going to be every week. I already have a guest lined up for next Friday, and it'll probably come out roughly about this time. I need to, lock down the times it comes out and the days, but I'm thinking Wednesdays and Fridays. The other one could be a little more fluid, but I think Wednesdays and Fridays each week are when this show is going to come out. And I am excited because it just creates more of an excuse to watch even more basketball, which only makes me happier. And it's a nice little loop that I've got myself in after all this quarantine and staying away from people and whatnot. It's a sense of normalcy, at least for me and for those listening to this. It's good to get back to a routine that makes sense on some level, even though I can't watch the games with anybody else. I've had a couple guests that I've reached out to say, they prefer to do it in studio, and I can't get access to a studio for the foreseeable future. It's not going to happen. Because no studio I know is really open right now. Nobody's meeting in any kind of close proximity. I was kind of surprised they wanted to sit 5 feet from me as we, basically just yell at each other for an hour to an hour and a half. That's kind of ballsy, but I've had more than one person say, you know what, if we're not going to do this in person, I'm not really a fan of doing it on Zoom or anything else. Be like, all right, so be it. To each their own. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. But so the games last night, the openings, man, I liked the packages that they rolled out to talk about social justice, and seeing all the different names or the phrases and whatnot on the uniforms really was powerful. I think the only downside or detriment to that is, since there are so many people that are starved for content and sports in general that may not be NBA fans, you're not going to know who any of these players are. Now, I do, thankfully, and I'm sure anybody listening to this does by and large, but I had one person reach out on Twitter and just say, you know what, I never watch the NBA, but I just miss live sports so much that I tuned into both the games. And I don't know if he was able to follow along as easily as anyone else, that's a diehard fan like you and I are. I'm assuming those listening, since you want to listen to coverage about games last night, are more than likely jonesing for more NBA, just like I am. And trust me, as much as I want to sit here and talk to you guys, I also want to turn it off and watch more games. So I'm conflicted right now, but I'm happy to be here. So back to the program at hand. I thought by and large it was very successful. The kneeling and all the players' arms interlocked was a great and powerful gesture. All the coaches wearing that pin, I thought was a great gesture. The only thing I think fell flat was the first national anthem. Was it Baptiste? I thought that was a dud personally. And the choir on the second one, the Compton choir, I thought was a very nice rendition of it. And the first one just felt disjointed and I don't know, it seemed weird. But outside of that, I thought it was a wild success. I like the piped in crowd noise. I was kind of surprised by that. I didn't think that would be as effective, but it gave a sense. There were times when you really did miss the crowd. Like in that first game, the Zion behind the back pass to Lonzo, the crowd, even an away crowd, would have gone bananas for that. And the LeBron dunk, just there's so much power and force and impact in that, the crowd would have gone crazy for that. Or the Mike Conley juke to a layup, I think it was on Lonzo. Yeah, it was. Would have got an ooh and an ah from the crowd. That was in the first half of the game. So those aspects of it, yes, it sucks to not have a crowd there. But on the flip side, now with all that extra space around the baselines and out of bounds, do you think Alex Caruso would have been able to pull off that steal late in game if the cameramen would have been where they're normally positioned along the baseline? I don't know. I don't know because he goes flying, out of bounds and has to, collect himself midair where people would have been sitting. So who knows if that pivotal play would have actually transpired in the course of a regular game as opposed to in this very specific setting. It'll, keep an eye on that because there's already been, like in the scrimmages, there was that Chris Paul baseline pass that he got to whip around and put a little English on it, a la Manu Ginobili back in the day when he used to do those little left-handed gunslinger with English. There's a couple clips of him doing that. If you want to find his career highlight stuff, and especially any that focus on assists, you'll definitely find one where he threw it along the baseline and definitely, put English on it, and it seems to arc around and goes to an open shooter in the other corner, and boom, nails the three. So the court layout is super interesting. I think the only thing within the context of the action during the game that didn't really work for me was the virtual fans. It's better than not having them, I guess. I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm not sold. It just, with the glitchiness and the freezing from people every once and again, I don't know. It seemed a little strange, although there was the Laker guy with the huge L gold chain, and you could see him sitting, I think he was still on a baseline seat. So it's good to see a familiar face. Let's, maybe we can get Clipper Darrell in there. For those who don't know, there's a Clipper Darrell, a longtime, fan of the Clippers that dresses up in a specific fashion and goes to the games. Or, God, what is his name? Is it Ravi, the Indian gentleman that's a Toronto fan? Or you get Spike Lee or maybe Jack Nicholson to zoom in, and they'll be one of the faces that's sitting courtside or on the baseline or something. I hope so. I would imagine once we get closer to finals and whatnot, and if it's going to be a marquee team like the Lakers, there's a good chance that you might get Jack or possibly other celebrities that get piped in via Zoom and get to watch the game. I haven't looked into how exactly they're deciding it. I know on the NBA app, they have, because they were advertising it during the game, there's a little button on the app that you can hit that activates extra applause in the arena. So they're attempting to be interactive with the fans, and it's a work in progress, but it's interesting and it's cool. I didn't mind the Olympic track cam that you normally see here in the States, at least, only on NBC's coverage of the Olympics, like running down every once again on court. But there was once where it did that and you missed the pivotal action because it ended up on the other side. It was a turnover on the other side of the court. But might as well play with it. You have this environment It seems like you could test out some ideas and some things that you've been sitting on for a while, maybe an above the court cam like they do in football and the zip line type of thing, and try something like that and just fiddle around with different ideas that the league could potentially take forward, a la the Elam ending for the All-Star game. Maybe in these first 8 games they should have gone with an Elam ending and just to build in even more excitement. I guess couldn't really do that because if you're going to say that these are regular season games and you haven't done it throughout the rest of the regular season, then there's no point in doing it now. But I do wish they had done the group stage like the World Cup. I think that was an interesting concept to fiddle with, and considering this wasn't the whole league anyway, and they had basically finagled this down to 22 teams in order to get Zion and the Pelicans in there with the hopes of making the playoffs, because that was the only reason that the likes of Portland and especially Washington got an invite, because they shouldn't have. Washington is, Washington's team is not there. Bradley Beal isn't going to play. John Wall, who appears to be healthy, they're going to hold him off. Bertans is sitting out this restart, and they're going to be running out. Like Hachimura is going to be the focus of the offense, which not a bad thing. He gets reps against NBA talent, but at the same time, I don't know how beneficial it is to the league as a whole, because by adding that extra team, an extra 2 teams, you're just creating the increased chance of an outbreak. The more people there are, the greater the chance, and it endangers the overall bubble. But everybody keeps testing negative, even with Lou Will going to titty bars. Good for you, Lou. He says he was there for wings, and as Kenny Smith said last night, he thinks he was there for the legs and the thighs. In his defense, I have heard that he's got a menu item named after him at that particular gentleman's club. That's how often he goes there. So it's not like he's a stranger, and perhaps he really, truly does love the wings, in addition to the overall ambiance and atmosphere. But so let's jump in on the first game. I will say this. Both games were sloppy, which is to be expected, as Reggie pointed out numerous times. And I love the outrage online at people at Reggie. It just kind of signals that we're back, because a lot of people don't like him as, a commentator. And he's not the best. He's not the worst I've ever heard, but he's not the best for sure. But the first game was pretty sloppy. There was a lot of ball handling and errant passes and throwing to guys. I remember one where Zion threw it. I think it was Josh Hart. Josh Hart was posted in the corner for a corner 3, but then began to cut to the basket because he assumed Zion was going up for the shot, and Zion lobbed it to the corner, and there was no man there. And it was a number of plays like that, like skip passes that were too high or ill-timed, whatnot. That's part of it. You have to get back into game action. So it's not really all that surprising that there were a boatload of turnovers. And that first game was really interesting, because when it was the starting lineups out there, it didn't seem as though the Pels had any size to get rebounds, and they were just getting manhandled on the boards. And then the second units checked in, and suddenly the Pels started to surge, because Utah on the second unit only has Jordan Clarkson. With the subtraction of Bogdanovich, now you're putting Royce O'Neal into the starting 5 or Joe Ingles, one of the two, depending on whatever the matchups are that Quinn Snyder wants to go for. And you don't have them as one of your stock reserves, so they're not going to get as much run with the second unit. So it reduces your overall shooting ability, and the defense can just kind of key in on Clarkson, although Clarkson had a really good game. But that lack of extra offensive oomph to have just a second player so the defense can't solely key in on you. The Pelicans' second unit managed to gain ground and turn the game competitive, and then, took the lead for a while because of it. Even when the starters came back in, they had some momentum on their side. So it looked like one of those things where the Jazz didn't necessarily need to win the game and the Pels were going to go all out. But that's the nice thing. It doesn't look like anyone's not taking at least these first 2 games, seriously. Both games were crazy competitive. And as everybody pointed out, and if you were watching, you noticed it in real time, Rudy Gobert, who shut all this down, got the first point in the game, first points rather, and then also had the icing free throws. So it was a nice little crowning moment for Rudy to come back and the Jazz to get a win. Who knows about the long-term future of him being with the Jazz, because as much as everybody is given this, kumbaya, Ubuntu, we're all in this together on the Jazz, it really seems as though discord has been sown. And there's been some tension over the years between Gobert and Mitchell, just in that Gobert wants the recognition for being an all-star, and he was this year. But having been defensive player of the year, didn't feel like he was getting his recognition within the league overall, say on, the all-stars and whatnot. And Donovan Mitchell jumped to become the face of the franchise and the guy that was anointed to be the one to take this team to a championship if they're ever going to make it in this current iteration. So by background accounts from reporters that follow them, there has been some tension, especially on Rudy's end, where he feels he should be getting more credit to this as to the success of the Jazz overall than he's gotten to this date. And we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how it comes, at the end of the season. Donovan Mitchell's going to get, he is going to get his max extension. And then what they do after that will be super interesting. But within this game, so in the first half, this is how wonky the first half was. JJ Redick was finishing at the rim really well. And he had a gorgeous little two-man game. Oh, who was that? I think it was with Drew Holiday, where they did a little two-man game across the baseline back and forth, and Redick went up for a layup and then did this little up and under pass to a waiting Drew Holiday, who was flanking him on his back left because his Holiday's defender had left him to come and protect the rim against JJ Redick, and Holiday went in for the easy dunk. But he couldn't hit an open three. And then the second half, he started to nail those down, so much so that at the end of the game, a lot of people assumed that play was drawn up for JJ, and Brandon Ingram took the shot. And it rimmed in and out. And for me personally, I'm not a Pels fan, but Ingram has shown the improvement and become a legitimate scoring threat, borderline all-NBA and all-star type player in the discussion now. If he can maintain what he did this year, maybe even improve a little bit. His on just 3 more minutes a game, I think his scoring average is up 9 to 10 points a game. His free throws are now in the 80th percentile. His assists and rebounds are up. So he has shouldered more of the load and done it efficiently, and elevated himself into the discussion of, man, this guy is really good. And at his length and size, it's difficult to defend him. So I'm not against him taking that shot. In essence, you have 2 guys on the court that you want shooting that. It's either Redick or it's Ingram. Redick has the higher percentage, but if Ingram can get a good look, then if I'm Alvin Gentry or a Pelicans fan, I'm fine with that. That's a good shot to me. Who I don't want shooting it is Lonzo. Lonzo had a terrible night last night. And I'm not going to, pile on Lonzo. A lot of guys had terrible nights last night, and some guys had great nights. A, that is the game, and B, they're just getting back into, gameplay and the speed of it all. And they've had, last games were in the beginning of March, like March 10th, March 11th. They've had 100 and some odd days off. It's been a long time since games were played. We've already had a full off season off. We have to jump back into playoff atmosphere basketball. That's asking a lot. Now, what has been brought up by others is, will the lack of a crowd be beneficial or detrimental to various players? And perhaps somebody that doesn't feed off the energy of the crowd, or as Teutonio World pointed out, Bledsoe has always said that he gets a little too overhyped on Milwaukee for playoff games and high pressure moments. And perhaps with lack of crowd, that'll settle his nerves and he'll be just a more effective and potentially a killer in the playoffs. Who knows? Other guys like Terrence Ross has pointed out that the depth perception feels a little bit off in the gym without the people behind and without the normal sight lines. And through all the scrimmages, his shooting percentages were down. But other guys are saying it's easier to key in and zone in, like on Reddick's podcast. Not to bolster that point, but he was saying as another one to say that it's an interesting, weird situation that may contribute to guys, not shooting as well initially early on. Who's saying it was entirely strange to shoot a free throw in dead calm. Now they piped in crowd noise last night, so it wasn't dead calm like it was in the scrimmages. But I also wouldn't mind hearing less of the crowd noise and less of the announcers, and to hear more of just the on-court game action. It reminds me of Summer League, going there before Summer League turned into Summer League. The first year that I went, there was nobody there. You could stroll in and out of the two courts at Thomas and Mack, and you get courtside whenever you want to and just walk in, and there's 40 people, in one gym and 200 over in the larger one. Just like there's nobody here, and it's awesome. And you can hear the talking back and forth, and the coaches barking out orders from the sideline, and sneakers squeaking, and just the overall, you got a better feel for the game. So I hope we get more of that, but it's a very unique situation. So we'll see how much of an effect it has on today's games. Will we see more of the same, where a couple guys come out, guns ablazing, and then by and large everybody else is either down or up and down, and it's kind of this weird kind of roller coaster effect? But there were positive signs for the Jazz. Now I think when they come into other contenders later on within their schedule on this lead up and in the best of seven, they're really going to miss Bogdanovic's extra scoring, because late in game they had to keep Clarkson on the floor, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think he went 11 for 17 from the floor, and he was one of their best players out there. Although they got pretty good shooting overall from their main guys. And Mike Conley was hitting shots. That's always a good sign. He was missing his little teardrop floaters. That's usually a signature. But it was positive by and large overall, and they have something to build on. But that loss of the extra scoring, the steady scoring of Bogdanovic, I don't know how that doesn't come to bite him in the ass. They went from sneaky, they could hang with a number of different teams, to, boy, Clarkson needs to be a spark plug with that second unit, because I don't know who they're going to surround him with, because they could end up getting murdered on these second lines if what happened in the first half against the Jazz is, in essence, what's going to happen to them anytime. Because look at like the Clippers last night. Pat Bev, there was talk that he wasn't going to play, but you don't have Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell, and they're still so ridiculously deep that there was a point at which PG and Kawhi were out, and the question of like, where are they going to get their offense from? And then JaMychal Green starts hitting his shots, and Landry Shamet didn't have a good night shooting, but I think Patrick Patterson shot fairly well. I can look that up real quick. They got solid production from, Patrick Patterson only went 2 of 2, but JaMychal Green 3 for 6, 2 for 4 from 3. That's not bad. But within the Jazz, like Jordan Clarkson went 8 of 17. Then Tony Bradley 2 for 2. Niang went over 6, and the ball every time it came out of his hands did not look good. Emmanuel Mudiay went 0 for 2, but he only played 10 minutes. He wasn't out on the court much. And, in Niang's defense, he was only out there for 13 minutes. But, man, those 6 shots from Niang, every time the ball left his hand, it did not look pretty. And if this is a playoff atmosphere, you do tighten your rotations down to about 8 guys, and you ride your horses more. And Quinn Snyder only played 9 guys last night. Rajon Tucker, Juwan Morgan, Ed Davis, and Jarrell Brantley didn't play. But I don't know what you're going to get from those 4 guys anyway, and that's already a pretty tight rotation. If you have Bogdanovich in that mix, then you don't have to rely as much on Niang or potentially Mudiay, but you need to get a little bit of rest for Conley and get another ball handler in there when you've got Clarkson. You would hope that Moutier would step up, but that is a thin, top-heavy roster. And Royce O'Neal had a good game at 5 of 11. He was 2 for 7 from 3, but still 5 of 11 overall from the floor. Almost had a double-double. So they got solid production from their starters. I think I have to look it up. Yeah. Every starter shot 429 and above, which is pretty great. And that 429 is Donovan Mitchell, but he got to the line for 7 shots to supplement that. So they need their starters to do that every game, every single game, if they're going to make any kind of push in the playoffs. And that's tough, man. That's asking a lot, especially for this is going to be, in essence, every other night for the next 3 months for these guys, unless certain playoff matchups could end early. So maybe you get a couple extra nights, but it's not going to be the normal where if you sweep your round 1 opponent and your potential round 2 opponent, those 2 teams go 7 games, you could have a week off. Like a full week off to sit around, because then there's that discussion of, oh, are they going to be rusty? This other team is coming off and they only have 1 day's rest and they have to turn around and you've had 7 days rest. So now you're not going to have that full extra complement of days. So it'll be interesting to see which teams can basically keep this pace up. That's why I was surprised that LeBron played 35-ish minutes last night. There's really no need. The Lakers don't need the win unless they just kind of want to get back into their winning form. I don't understand what was the impetus to play him that much when he's going to get a lot of run over the next 3 months if the Lakers are going to go as deep as they feel that they could, and they could. And then on the flip side of that, the Pelicans, so Lonzo Ball went 2 of 13 from the floor, did not have a good game. Beyond that, 7 assists, 2 steals, 6 blocks, 3 turnovers, 4 fouls. Filled in the stat sheet in other ways. The 2 turnovers is not bad considering, he's a primary ball handler when he's in there. But the 2 of 13, if you're a Pels fan, you got to hope that's anomalous. Zion only got to play a very specific set number of minutes and was wildly effective as per usual when he was out there. So hopefully he can build back towards game shape and then there won't be a minutes restriction. But man, oh man, if this is going to be what it is with Zion, if only he could actually play every game. I hope not, because when he's out there, he's utterly unstoppable, just barreling over guys. Sometimes it's an offensive foul. Other times it's not. And you kind of, I don't know, you defer to the refs on that one, because there was, one in the first half where I don't believe he got called for an offensive foul, and then one in the second half where he did. And the second half one is like, that's very similar to what Zion gets away with quite a bit, where he just ever so slightly dropped his right shoulder as he's driving with his left hand. But because he's such just a truck of a human being, barrels over his defender. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of like, Shaq. Shaq got fouled every time he had the ball, but at the same time, because he could just move anyone out of the way, technically, you could call an offensive foul on him quite a bit as well. So it's this weird, you kind of have to play it by ear on some level and what you're going to allow and what you're not. Now, for the Pels, I think one of the most disconcerting thing is Jrue Holiday didn't attempt a single free throw. Not a one. You got to get to the line if you're going to have any chance in winning. And Brandon Ingram, while I don't mind him taking that shot late in the game, he shot okay from the floor, especially not for someone his caliber and at his volume. It wasn't good. He went 7 of 20 at 350 clip, 2 of 8 from 3. But I would say by and large, a lot of those shots looked good. They may have rimmed out, but they were in rhythm. And it's good to see the confidence. So he, in no way does he not have the green light to keep shooting. But Jrue Holiday, you got to get to the free throw line. And then their bench played admirably. JJ, 7 of 15, was a little bit cold from 3 in the first, but warmed it up in the second, and he was getting his normal JJ curl screen shots up and just looked like, true to form, exactly what he does. But that's all, he practices him along with Ray Allen and back in the day, or Kyle Korver, or anybody that's in essence a spot up shooter. It's a rhythm thing, and they all practice that specific set motions over and over and over again, where the muscle memory is fine tuned. So I'm not surprised that JJ had, a JJ like night. It's the other guys that you would hope round, more into shape. JJ's been in the league now for 15 years, 16 years. So the repetition and the standard that he sets for himself is pretty much cemented. Whereas the younger guys or newer to the league, you got to, basically build up that repertoire of, this is how I practice, and this is how I stay game ready and game shape. So for the Pels, Lonzo, A, needs to have a better game. B, you would hope you're going to get better production from Melli when he checks in, or Etuan Moore when he checks in, or Jackson Hayes, just to be the athletic kind of freak on some level when he checks in, because he's an undersized center whenever he's playing. So you would hope his athleticism would be able to outweigh any of his deficits in size. There were positives there, but the Pelicans, really needed that win. They need every one of these wins if they're going to sneak in to that 8th, because Memphis is in the driver's seat. Memphis and, Portland's got a shot, although Portland, Dame has, I think it's unofficial. I don't know if it's official. They're calling it soreness in the left foot last I saw, which was 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago. But the reports I read were plantar fasciitis. And I've had that before. I don't know if you've had that before. It's not fun. And as far as I know, and it's been years, and they also have access to medical technology that I don't, offhand. They're doctors that specialize in taking care of this, these types of injuries over and over and over again. But rest is the best medicine for it. I've had, jumper's knee as well, and that is rest. And it's an indeterminate amount of time. So if he's going to be dealing with plantar fasciitis, even with the return of Nurkic and Zach Collins and, a slimmed down Melo, they looked like they could be potentially a tough out for anybody. They became, a lot of pundits and talking heads sweetheart, selection for this overall run, just because they're adding 2 key pieces that they've needed, a strong interior, which you're not exactly going to get the consistency with Hassan Whiteside. So the Pels needed this. They needed this win flat out, and they almost had it. If that shot goes in for Brandon Ingram, then we're obviously having a different discussion right now. But it was a really entertaining game. Both of them were. The NBA, Adam Silver, all the governors, the owners, whatnot, and TNT, their TV partners, and ESPN, the advertisers, and the fans all have to be excited that was the first night, because both games were compelling. Even if you didn't really care about the Pelicans and the Jazz, still a really engaging game that came down to a last-second shot that rimmed in and out and could affect the fate of one of the teams, to their detriment. That might be the deciding game for the Pels. Like, they're, a half game out by the end, and they don't get to have that play-in game. Who knows? I hope that's not the case. I don't really have a dog in the fight as to who makes the 8th. I just like it to be competitive. And if these first 2 games are evidence of that, and what this, little tune-up to the playoffs is going to be like, then I can't wait. It's going to be a ton of fun. Now, moving on to the second game, and we're going to do this one, and then I am going to close out and start watching some more basketball, because I'm looking forward to it, was the marquee matchup of the night. The whole reason everybody is tuning in to the night. It is the Battle of Los Angeles via Orlando. You have 2 teams that have genuine championship aspirations, and they have the personnel to do it. squaring off in the opening night. And as I said before, unless the Lakers really just wanted to establish some sort of identity within the bubble and a sense of urgency and excitement, pace of play, and whatnot, I don't really see the point of playing heavy minutes for LeBron and heavy minutes for AD, who, is injury prone. So to see them play 35 minutes ish a piece was surprising. And also, I have to look, but the number now, it makes more sense to me that the Clippers would try and get run out of, especially Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard when you don't have Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell. But as I said not that long ago, considering this is going to be 3 straight months of every other day on some level of playoffs, it would seem as though Stan Van Gundy's idea that or no, was it Stan? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The coaches might prefer to slowly play their heavy minute guys more and more time as we build up over these 8 games, so they play 20 in game 1, 22-4 in game 2, 24-6 in game 3, et cetera, et cetera. So you're building them up to full game speed action by the time the playoffs start. And that makes all the sense in the world to me for LeBron, especially. I mean, he finally lets the gray in his beard come through. Just decided, I guess, to stop coloring his beard. Good for him. As soon as I saw that, the photos started coming out. It's like, there it is. I've got it too, man. I started getting it roughly about the same age. Father Time, is undefeated. You might as well just own up to your age, because at the end of that game, man, you showed it doesn't really matter. When it counts, you're still one of, if not the best player in the game. Although he had an up and down game. And early on, he was just trying to get his teammates involved. He started off with a number of assists, but wasn't really looking for a shot for himself. Just wanted to get others going, especially AD, who had an excellent game. But the Clippers, I was surprised they played Paul George and Kawhi as much as they did. So Kawhi played 33 minutes. Paul George played 34 minutes. And then the Lakers, LeBron played 34 and Anthony Davis played 35. But Reggie Jackson to get the start on the point and bring Pat Beverly off the bench was super interesting. And all the talk of Alex Caruso being the starting point guard. Well, LeBron is the starting guard, but KCP really slotted into that role last night. So there was a lot of talk, and I was expecting to see maybe Caruso run out there with the starters, but Caruso got plenty of playing time. And early on, man, Reggie Jackson apparently was just like, green light, I'm shooting. It doesn't really matter. And they kind of needed it. There were, Reggie Jackson went 3 of 10, so not the best showing. But outside of that, like Marcus Morris went 0 for 4. He looked rusty. He looked super rusty. And the Clippers, it's hard to evaluate, but at the same time, they had so many turnovers that the Lakers were unable to capitalize. So they had 4 more turnovers, but the disparity in the turnovers was greater for a large portion of the game, weighted against them. And they also had more fouls. By the end of the game, I think it was only a difference of 3 or 4 fouls. I can look it up real quick. They had 30 to were personal fouls, 27. So it's only 3 difference. So not that huge, but there was a greater disparity. And through halftime, the biggest difference between the two teams were, yes, the Clippers are committing all these turnovers, but they were shooting pretty much lights out from the floor, and the Lakers could not hit a bucket, especially from 3. Now, they rounded that out a little bit in the second half and overall shot a little bit better from 3, but not great. So but it was AD carrying the Lakers, and people are crowing today saying, "Oh, well, look what the Clippers did, even without Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell." And then Lakers are chiming back in, "Oh yeah, well, we don't have Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo." It's like, okay, well, those two aren't directly equivalent to one another. You're mainly missing Bradley for his defensive matchups, not for his offensive punch. I mean, he can put in some points, but I don't think he averages more than 8 or 9 points a game, and Rondo's roughly about the same. Whereas Lou Will and Montrez both average 18 points a game. That's completely different. And Lou Will and Montrez have a beautiful two-man game that is really difficult to stop for tons of different players. They run more pick and roll than practically anybody in the league. Sorry, I had something in my teeth. So for the Clippers to be without them and still come within, a shot at the end, Paul George, you're never going to get that foul call. That was not an egregious enough foul to sway the end of a game. He was saying that LeBron gave him a little chicken wing and pushed off, but from the vantage point and the angles we saw, it was not so severe that it was an egregious missed, no call. You got to take and make that shot. And kudos to LeBron for, on the other end of the court, he took his shot and then followed his shot like a good shooter, and nobody boxed him out. There were, I think, 4 Clippers, and you can just see the overhead camera angle where he comes running into the lane, and there's 4 Clippers right there, and nobody boxes him out. Nobody boxes anybody, and just gets that little putback to put them up. And then it comes down, Clips have the ball, and LeBron shuts down Kawhi, and then switches over to PG when he gets the ball and doesn't give him any room. And PG is forced to take a terrible shot. I think they should have, winged it around a little bit more and try and find it open. But it's easy to sit here and play Monday morning quarterback after the fact. The clock is ticking down, and you're just trying to get a shot up to win this game. The Clippers don't necessarily need to win this game, but it would have been good because cementing that number 2 seed means the only time you got to play the Lakers is in the Western Conference Finals. And that's what you want. You want to take them on because your depth should be advantageous, should be a greater advantage the later you go into the playoffs. The Lakers added Dion, who had a good game, and JR to offset the loss of Bradley and Rondo. But everybody else the Clippers had outside of Joakim Noah has basically been with the team and knows the system and knows their role. And there's a greater familiarity with everybody else. The spots that your teammates like to be in. Now, JR has played with LeBron before, so he understands where he's supposed to go. And Dion played great last night. But personally, I think that's fool's gold. Dion, there was a very Dion moment where he was sitting at the top of the key, and he wasn't his old, more fervent Dion barking for the ball, but it went to Kuzma. Kuzma is the default number 3 option. And when he's out there and there's, only LeBron or only AD, then he's the number 2 option. And both of those guys are sitting, then he's the number 1 option. That's how the Lakers are built. And the ball swung to him on the wing, and he was defended. He was manned up. And Dion, his defender, was, 3 feet away or whatnot. And just like, give me the damn ball. I can shoot. And Dion's always kind of been like that. On the one hand, it's good to see the confidence, but on the other, you kind of need to know your place in the pecking order. So the shots fell tonight, but what about another night where Dion wants to be Dion and he's going to shoot 10 shots and he's going to go 2 for 10? It's not really going to bode well for Dion if he does that. Say in a 7-game series, he does it twice. You're not going to get much run then if you're always gonna do. I don't know. I just don't like Dion Waiters. I've never been a Dion Waiters fan. He has the talent, but I just think his ego gets in the way too much of his talent. and he'd be better served at this point in his career to pick his spots. I mean, he got run out of town in Miami, and he did it to himself. He didn't want to be there anymore. Perhaps Miami, which is known to be basically the most stringent of the franchises, wasn't his cup of tea. Works for some guys, like Jimmy Butler seems to thrive in that type of situation. But other guys, you have to have your body fat percentage at a certain point. Every player's is, slightly different, but you get weighed in. And there's also conditioning tests, and you have to pass the conditioning tests. And Miami's a slightly different animal than most if not every other team, where they put greater demands on their players and they demand excellence. We want to make sure that you're staying in shape in the offseason and putting in the work to become a champion. And you kind of have to applaud that. But certain guys don't want to do that. I mean, can you imagine Allen Iverson? We're talking about practice in that type of environment situation. Unless they're winning championships, I don't think Iverson would want to stay there. That's just a guess. I don't know. And I don't want to speak for AI, but, so Deion getting run out of town. I just think last night, yes, he can do that. He has all the ability in the world. But for me personally, I trust JR. JR has been in these situations. Yes, he screwed up the finals, game 1 against Golden State 2 years ago. But I think JR knows what is needed of him or from him on a team of this caliber, where if I'm open, I need to shoot, but I don't need to be demanding the ball. I don't need to be throwing any wrench in the works. I just need to play my role to the best of my ability, which is to be a shooter and to be athletic and to find the moments when I can really help my team. I hold out reservations as to whether or not Deion can do that, but hopefully for Deion's sake, I'll be eating those words. But the Lakers looked, by and large, outside of their up and down shooting, AD and Kuzma had good shooting games. I can look at the stats real quick. Yeah, AD was 8 of 19 from the floor, but 16 to 17. That first half, and especially first quarter, but first half was the AD free throw show. And usually when someone's going to the line that much, it's like, oh, man, they're getting every call. But he does get banged around quite a bit. This isn't him. Only once did he do the sweep around to get a call. And if he did that every time, a la Harden, my problem with Harden, then it gets annoying. If you do it once in a game, that's smart because to me, at least, and I realize I'm being a hypocrite, but you caught your defender kind of sleeping and you could take advantage of that as opposed to barreling in the lane and shoving your hand in areas where it's going to get hacked. In this artificial kind of, you're not really going to shoot ever in those, and you do it 5 times, 6 times a game. It's difficult to watch. Whereas catching a guy slipping, that's just smart. If you do it once. If AD did that every time down the court, I would hate it just as much and would be harping on it just as much. So Houston Rocket fans, I'm not exactly singling you out, but at the same time, when Harden doesn't do that, I love watching him play. He is undoubtedly one of the most talented scorers in the league right now, like bar none. If you look at the statistical categories of all the offensive numbers he led in this year, it's impressive. It's thoroughly impressive. But I don't know, goading for fouls so you can go to the line. Last I looked it up, he is the only player, if you go through any MVP or any all-star or all-NBA level player, and I looked through about 20 or 25 years of just finding an all-NBA team and then looking through all the different players, Harden is the only one that has more free throws made than field goals made. He's the only one. Everybody else is like 1,000 difference, 2,000 difference. Some are even greater disparity there. And he has more free throws made than field goals made, because he's always hunting for a fucking free throw, and it is annoying. But is it smart? Yeah. Yeah, it is. Does it lead to winning? Yes, it does. Is that the entire point? Yeah, I don't want to watch it. That's my problem. But that has nothing to do with last night's game, which was wildly entertaining. Congrats to the Lakers and to the Jazz fans and to everybody, to NBA fans as a whole, man. That was a ton of fun to watch. I enjoyed every second of it. As soon as I log off here, I've got a little bit of editing to do, but I'm throwing on more games, and I'm watching games for the rest of today and not doing anything else with my life, even though I've got a stack of things that I need to be getting to. But I took these 2 days off. I'm going to stick by it, take these 2 days off, relax, enjoy myself, watch some more NBA basketball. If you could, let me know what you think on Twitter at Matt Nost. I think for the time being, I'm still debating. I created a separate YouTube channel for this, but I also have my channel. I'm not entirely sure where. I guess by the time you may be viewing this, you'll see where I put it up, because I'll be tweeting out the link. But if you could share this around, I'd really appreciate it. I've got 2 shows next week. I've got one guest lined up that I know is, a big fan favorite, and he'll be back on. And I've already had 2 or 3 other people basically kind of cherry pick the day that they want to do of those Wednesday, Fridays. So, and another thing I'll be doing is I'll live stream, I don't know, since there's 2 a week of these, I threw it up on Twitter, and it was kind of a trial run because I wanted to see if I could get how quickly I could get the audio and whatnot using an old streaming platform. And now I switched over to Zoom just because I can get it instantaneously. But then I don't know how to, as of right now, tie it into live stream. I don't think I can on a free platform with Zoom, so it'll go up afterwards. So you lose off there. You can't watch the live stream in this capacity. So it's a trade-off. Do you want both of them quicker, or do you want the live stream up first and then the audio goes up later? I guess let me know. Would you prefer to have the live stream up, because then there could be a chat function enabled, but the audio, you'll probably get the audio the next day. So if I record on a Friday, you're not going to get the audio till Saturday. And that's how it'll pan out. And at that point, is that discussion, considering it's a day old, kind of stale and irrelevant? I don't know. So please let me know at Matt Nost, to whichever channel I put this on YouTube. Please subscribe. That way, once it gets over, I think it's like 100 subscribers, I can go ahead and change the URL of it and make it a personalized one, and just make it easier for people to find. And then subscribe to this is also a new podcast feed, because I can't get into Collider, into the studio there. So I'm doing this all from home, and having people zoom in or stream in on the old platform, depending on what you guys let me know. And kind of building from the ground up. But, talk to Mark over Collider, and we might be able to work something out there and do some different basketball content or some sort of tie-in, and create some more basketball content over there. He offered and said, do you want to continue doing it over here? But I was the only sports show, and everybody over there was wildly supportive, from the staff to the fans. But it always felt weird once I was the last one to show up and do a sports show, when the feed has been winnowed down to, it is solely just movies and TV and pop culture type of stuff, that I felt like the odd man out. And, perhaps doing this solo, I can find a partnership, or it takes off on its own. I don't know, but I just want to continue talking basketball, and hopefully you guys come along for that ride. Let me know what you think at Matt Nost, and please subscribe to whatever feed of your choice. And that is it. Go ahead and log off. If you got the day off, watch basketball along with me. I'll probably be tweeting out every once I get blown away by a specific play, but there's some great matchups today, and I can't wait to watch them all. Thank you so much for listening. And that is it this week on Dropping Dimes. Adios.